Hello UC families, welcome to our last week of our theme on imagination. Today I have a short poem by Shel Silverstein to read as my chalice lighting. And it goes like this. Draw a crazy picture, write a nutty poem, sing a mumble-gumble song, whistle through your comb. Do a loony-goony dance, cross the kitchen floor, put something silly in the world that ain't been there before. And that is all for the imagination. So this week we are focusing on at the bedside, a blessing, and the extra mile. First, at the bedside is a story to tell at bedtime. And this month we have a story that is a creation story having to do with imagination and how when what does not yet exist, believing that it's possible and then creating it, right? Where do those imaginations come from? And the story is written by a UU religious educator. Her name is Erica Shadowsong. And she tells this story called The Golden Chain. And it is a story that comes from the Yoruba tradition. It's an Ife creation story. And in the Soulful Home packet, there are some links that you can click on to learn more about the background to this story. There is a lot of information in this packet, more than I would want to spend time explaining here. So be sure to look at that. And there is a link to the story, and it is on the UUA's website. And there are two versions. There's a long version and then a condensed version. And the one I'm going to share today is the condensed version, which is still kind of long actually. So, the Golden Chain, the story goes like this. Long ago, before there were any people, all life existed in the sky. Olaroon lived in the sky, and with Olaroon were many Orishas. They all lived by a young baobab tree, where they found everything they ever needed for food, work, or play. In fact, they were all very creative and made things all the time, clothing themselves in beautiful robes and skirts and gold jewelry. Now, Olaroon had told them that all the vast sky was theirs to explore, but all of the Orishas seemed happy to stay near the baobab tree, except for Obalata. Obalata was the curious Orisha who wasn't content to live blissfully by the baobab tree. Like Orishas, he had certain powers, and he wanted to put them to use. As he pondered what to do, he looked far down through the mists below the sky. And as he looked and looked, he began to realize that there was a vast empty ocean below the mist. Obalata went to Olaroon and said, I want to go down from the heavens to the dark seas below and make something. Make beings like you did, so I can share them my knowledge and teach them. Olaroon, who himself had been made by Olodumare, the mysterious God beyond all things, understood Obalata's desire to create and was more than willing to say yes. I suggest you talk to Arunmila, he advised. He can see far into the future how things will go, and if anyone knows the magic you will need to do this, it is him. So Obatala consulted Arumala of the far sight. Arumala cast his seeds on his tray and frowned, looking at them thoughtfully. Finally, he said that Obatala would need, among other things, 3 important things to take with him. First, a snail shell filled with powder made from the baobab tree, some palm kernels, and then the sacred golden egg that contained all of the spirits of the Orishas. You will also need a way to get down, he said. So go to this goldsmith and ask him to make you a chain that reaches to the world below. Even though Obatala did not know what everything was for, he did exactly as Olorun said. First, he went to all the other Orishas and asked them for all the gold they had, which they gave him. Then he took it to the goldsmith and said, "Make me a chain that drops down into the world below so I can climb safely down." He dressed in clean white robes, packed his belongings, the snail shell with the tree powder and the palm seeds. Last, he removed the sacred egg from the tree and held it carefully clutched to his chest. Then Obatala began to climb down the golden chain, down to the dark swirling waters. For 7 days he climbed, and the dark waters got closer and closer. On the last day, when he got to the end of the chain, he found it was too short. Obatala hung there, swinging gently on the golden chain from heaven, wondering what to do. Then Arumala, who was watching, called him from above. "Use the shell!" Obatala remembered the snail shell and pulled it out of his pack. But he was carrying so many things as he balanced in the air, the powder in the shell spilled out into the water. As the sand hit the water, it formed masses of solid land, mountains, islands, plains, and as he watched, he did not notice how tightly he was holding the egg until suddenly, yes, it cracked. It cracked against the chest, and out of the egg flew the Sankofa, the great golden bird who was always looking behind it into the past to carry its wisdom to the present. And with the Sankofa bird came the spirits of all the Orishas, in the crowd of colors, carrying tools and musical instruments, machetes and crossbows, for they all had their own powers and knowledge. They were hunters and fighters, dancers and diviners, and they brought the powers of nature and the elements as they explored the new world, and each found a home where they were most comfortable. When all of the Orishas had been released into the world, Obatala got himself to work. He dropped from the golden chain onto the ground and took a walk, dropping the palm nuts into the ground. And as he dropped them, giant trees burst forth and grew with great speed as he hummed and walked along. Then he sat down and began to mold shapes in the sand with water until he had made many beings that looked a little bit like him and like the other Orishas. Olorun happened to look down from the skies as Obatala finished the people. And seeing that they were not yet alive, he took a deep breath and breathed their spirits into them. Obatala was so happy, but he began to notice something was wrong. The bodies were all different. They were not perfect. And the way they talked and behaved towards each other was sometimes strange and unkind. Then he remembered. During his crafting, he had gotten thirsty and taken some of the juice from the palm trees. But the juice had been fermented into wine and made him tipsy. He felt horrible. Obatala sat down and groaned into the earth. "I've been careless," he cried to himself, "and now the people will suffer because I was not paying attention to how I made them." Now the other Orishas had heard their brother groaning in pain, and from the forests and streams, the ocean and the forest, they spoke. "Obatala, Obatala," they said, "didn't you create these beings so you could share your wisdom in the first place? What does it matter if they aren't perfect? Now not only you are here, but so are we. And we swear to you that we will also bring our gifts to help them. We will teach them all the things we know, how to take care of themselves, protect each other, and love each other as a family, as we were. Wherever they go and whatever happens to them, we promise you that as long as your world exists, they will find us in it." Obatala smiled as he listened to his brothers and sisters, comforted. For now he knew that whenever his people found trouble, they would help to see them through it. This story is also followed by a version of the spiritual Wade in the Water, which you may be familiar with. You can Google it and hear versions of it. Erica Shadow Song, when she performs and retells the story, she sings a version of Wade in the Water that has a neo-pagan aspect to it. I was not able to find a recording of it, though, to share with you. So if you just Google Wade in the Water, you can hear the original spiritual. And in the Soulful Home packet, you can find the words to the version that Erica Shadow Song sings when she retells the story. So as part of our bedtime bedside segment, there are some follow-up questions you can share with your children and think about a little bit. The first one is, when Obatala's imagination sent him on his great adventure to create beings, he was told to bring some things. Even though he didn't know what they were for, he brought them, trusting that he would figure out how to use them on the way. So the question is, does it excite you or scare you to jump into adventures when you're not sure how it will work out? In other words, is it exciting or scary when there are unknowns coming? Here's another question. Obatala ended up creating an entirely new world because of some mistakes that he imaginatively made use of. Have you ever used your imagination to make something out of a mistake? And one more question. If you were Obatala, what kind of new beings would you imagine and create? Next, we have our blessing of imagination and the extra mile. I think I'll go ahead and share the extra mile first and end with the blessing. And this month, the extra mile is based on the book, What Do You Do With an Idea?, which you've probably heard in worship at UCE, and you may have even got the book yourself at home. And in the Soulful Home packet, there is a link to the book that you can buy online, or of course your library may have a copy. So the extra mile is about celebrating our most imaginative ideas, even though sometimes they may be pretty big and unwieldy. It's something to still consider making them happen. So when you tell this story, you might want to, if you're going to do it at bedtime, hide either a gold-colored balloon, or if you don't like to use balloons, make a little paper origami balloon out of gold-colored paper, and just kind of put it somewhere aside. And when you read the book, you will know that there's an object in the book that is gold-colored, which would relate to this balloon or the origami balloon. And you'll need to think of an idea that you imagined recently, or one that you've had for a long time and want to explore and share. So when you read the book, and when you finish, you bring out your balloon, and you could play that game where you have to keep the balloon off the floor. Or if you're using the origami ball, just hit it back and forth. And as you play, share a big idea that you've had. Just say, so I've had this big idea, and it goes like this. And when you're done sharing your idea, invite them to share an idea they might have. The idea is to have them realize that even adults have big ideas and can use our imaginations, and that we can try to make those a reality, and that we want to hear our children's ideas and their imaginations and help them come to fruition if possible. Then in the Soulful Home Packet, at the bedside section, you'll also see a link to another song Leah Morris has recorded for us, and you will see a description in the video of the song, and you can teach them, your children, motions to sing with the song.
Who will I be? Who will I be? What will I see? What will I see? In this great world, in this great world, who could be free? Who could be free? And what will I build? What will I build? What will I find? What will I find? My story begins. My story begins inside my mind. Inside my mind. Who will I be? Who will I be? And what will I see? And what will I see? In this great world. In this great world. Who could be free? Who could be free? What will I build? What will I build? And what will I find? What will I find? My story begins. My story begins inside my mind. Inside my mind. In my imagination. My imagination. What is an imagination? Lucy, do you know what imagination means?
I think imagination is what helps people create new things all the time. Because you can't create new things if you can't imagine what you want them to be.
That is absolutely true, Jacob. Everything human made was an idea first. One of my favorite imaginers in history was Leonardo da Vinci. I loved that he imagined that human beings could fly hundreds of years before we figured out how to do it. And Dr. King is another great imaginer. His speeches about the dream that he had outlined a vision for how people could live better together in this country. It was all about having that vision first, and then finding the words to communicate it, and then being inspired to certain actions that would bring it closer and closer to reality. Do you like to make up stories? When you play with your magnets or when you play with your babies? That's using your imagination, thinking of stories and characters who are doing things all inside your mind. It's amazing. We have movies playing in our minds all the time. And it's really important to be the director of our movies, to recognize that we can tell ourselves stories that make us feel good or stories that make us feel bad. And we get to choose which thoughts we have. We just have to practice deciding how we use our imaginations. Can you think of something that maybe doesn't exist yet, or that no one has ever seen, but that can make your life better or make the world better for those of us who are sharing it? I would love to know what kind of ideas you have about how the future could be, and that you're already starting to imagine, and that one day all of us will see. Who will I be?
Who will I be?
And what will I see?
And what will I see?
In this great world,
In this great world,
who could be free?
who could be free?
What will I build?
What will I build?
And what will I find?
What will I find?
My story begins
Story begins
inside my mind,
inside my mind.
in my imagination.
Lastly, we have our blessing of imagination. A little way to end your evening. And it goes like this. When we imagine liberty, true freedom for all people everywhere, may we grant our spirits a dance of joy. When we imagine friendship and understanding among siblings across all cultures, may we reach out our hands in anticipation of that one-day clasp of mutuality. When we imagine our loved ones coming to harm, may we feel the warmth of the source of love that lives in each of us, and here find faith that all will be well. When we imagine the fragility of our democracy in our own muscles, may we feel the strength of those working for voices and votes for all. When we imagine what has never been, what isn't, what could not be, may possibility dawn, as well as a vision of a beautiful new future, beginning with our very next thought and action. So may it be, and we imagine it so. Amen. Blessed be, and have a wonderful rest of the month with your imagination.